Welcome everyone to our workshop, Unjudge Someone, How the Human Library Can Help Reduce Biases. Really happy to see all of you here. My name is Leslie Gale. I am in the English department as well as currently serving as Professional Development Coordinator. And Kristen, I'll allow you to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Kristen Peacock, and I'm an adjunct counselor here at CRC.
So you may be wondering why we're giving this workshop. Our goal is by the end of the workshop, you'll have a much better idea of that and maybe even have some opinions about human libraries. So this idea actually came out of last year's one book. Our one book last year was called Blind Spot, and it was all about biases. The authors were instrumental in creating the IUT, the implicit association test, and talked a lot about different biases. The one thing that they didn't talk about too much, except to say we don't know about any long-term fixes for this problem about implicit biases. We on the One Book Committee, and Kristen was on it, and Teresa Lopez is here, she was on that committee. We're doing some research and talking about possible ways that we can overcome our biases, and the human library came up as one of those interventions, one of those strategies. So I'm just going to give you that much background for now, because we're going to start learning more about what do we mean by human libraries. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide.
Okay, so before we move further, we also want to get a sense of what you guys already know about the human library. So we are going to have you take a poll, and we're going to see what we know in the room already.
It's just one question. Okay, we have a lot of people who've answered. But not quite everyone, 83%. So if you're just coming back from a break, feel free to take this poll. You see that we have a couple of newcomers. Welcome. Hopefully you'll see on your Zoom the Human Library survey, and I'd love for you to take that survey. It's just one question. So interestingly, nobody answered they've experienced a human library event. Although we do have one person I know who has, and she's our other presenter, so she's going to be able to share some really great information with us. We have 75% of folks who took the poll who don't know anything yet, and 12% watched the preview video. Well done. That was only like an hour and a half ago, so that was awesome. And then we have just a couple of folks who were already familiar with human libraries. So we'll go ahead and end the poll, and would love to hear from those who answered that they were already familiar with the human library. What did they know about it? How did they become familiar with it? Of course, that poll was anonymous, so I'm not able to call on anyone, but if anyone is willing, feel free to unmute and speak up.
Maybe
No problem.
we're not feeling ready for that yet. Okay.
Yeah, no problem at all. We honor your choice to not speak up, and you'll probably feel much more comfortable speaking up a little bit later in the workshop after we've talked about a few things, although no clue. Okay, no problem. No clue, no problem. So let's go to the next slide, and we are going to show you a little bit of a longer video that gives a really great overview of human libraries. And one of the reasons that this is full disclosure, one of the reasons we wanted to hold this workshop was to be able to inform the CRC community about human libraries, and then get your perspective on if you think this might be a good thing to do here at CRC. So on this slide, it mentions that it's a worldwide nonprofit organization, and the goal is to connect and strengthen communities through one-on-one conversations. The terminology is a little hard to kind of get, and maybe a little off-putting at first. So this is not a library of bound paper books. Instead, though, they are living books with individuals who have experienced prejudice. Readers are community members who borrow a living book by listening to the book's experiences and asking questions, and librarians schedule and monitor sessions between books and readers. So wanted you to get that general context as we go into the video.
Okay, so I'm gonna give this a go. It's about 10 minutes, and so we'll meet back here when it's over. Not, hold on one second.
And this is a video from our library.
Hey, Leslie, can you tell me what you see on the screen?
I see films on demand. I see that it's coming up.
Perfect.
So we'll just, yeah,
Go full screen.
make it full screen.
I'm a feminist book.
I'm a Buddhist book.
I am Cancer Survivor book.
My name is Ronnie Abigail. I'm 35 years old. I'm from Denmark. And I'm the creator and founder of the Living Library. I'm in Los Angeles because we're launching the Living Library in North America this week. We have a Living Library event at Santa Monica Public Library.
Hi. Hi, are you Ronnie? Yeah. Hi, so good to meet you.
Thanks for having us. The Living Library is a place where books are people. You don't take out a physical book. You take out an actual person on loan for up to 45 minutes, an hour, and you sit down with that person and you confront them with your own prejudices and stereotypes about that person.
Getting caffeine, getting ready to just chatter away about Buddhism.
I guess, usually people think that feminists don't shoot their legs.
Every living book represents a stereotype of prejudice. The Muslim, the rabbi, the gay, the journalist, the ex-neo-Nazi, the skinhead, the hip-hopper.
Ronnie started this whole thing in Europe, and they've had so much success in Europe, and now we are the first official Living Library project in the United States.
For 8 years, we've been traveling around most of Europe because we realized that in every country there are prejudices and stereotypes, and in every country we need some kind of approach to create a space for this dialogue. And you guys are part of a very important work today to see whether or not the American public is ready to have that dialogue. I can tell you about one loan that was I think, very special to why we're here today. Because this was on the very first day of the very first living library. A policeman was taken out by 3 young people from what's called the extreme left movement, the extreme socialists. And this group from this environment they had a lot of prejudices against the police. They had 2 hours with the guy. They're sitting at a desk for about an hour, sharing a beer. The policeman is having a water. 3 or 4 of their friends come over, not knowing about the living library, and said, "Who is this guy?" And one of the readers said, "That's a policeman that we borrowed in the living library." And then they said, "What? A policeman?" And the 3 or 4 of them ganged up on him verbally. "Well, you're this," and the man was taking a verbal thrashing from these kids. And before he could reply, his 3 readers, friends with the other 4 guys, got up and said, "Shut up, you guys. You don't know this guy. We know this guy." That's the living library. You're Leslie.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
You got your first reservation already, do you know?
Someone told me that, actually.
It's a funny story. This kid, David, your reader, he's barging in here at 10-something. His folks called him from Florida. Said, "Do you know there's a living library around the corner from where you live?
Yeah.
You got to get there." And he storms in here at 10:30 and is like, "I want to take out," and he signed up for you.
Oh my God.
So at 12, you're working. Better eat fast. Yeah.
Hi, what's available? Is the raw food available? Yeah, what is? The raw food is available.
We have always a counter where the librarians, the living librarians, are serving the readers. And then they'll try and facilitate a loan by presenting the different books.
I'm a fat activist book.
So what do you do, like go on diets?
Oh yeah, I did do the dieting yo-yo stuff. Everyone does it. And then when I was 19, I call it my starvation phase, when I literally ate 500 calories a day for a few years, and I lost weight. I got down to where I was, skinny for me, quite skinny, but I was really unhealthy. I was having a lot of problems.
Do you like sports? As an athlete? Are you an athlete?
I would rather poke out my own eye with a sharp stick than ever watch or participate in sports. No, too much trauma from gym class, and I was the last one always picked.
When I was 14, I had an incident in the supermarket. A man with long red hair and 2 dogs, and I'm standing outside the supermarket waiting for my mother to come out. The guy looks at me like this, and he goes, I don't know what that means in your whistling language, but in mine it means, "Hey, sexy." I felt so bad. I felt so violated. I thought that all homosexuals wanted me, and I started hating them for it. So a little bit further out, we're in a park, and there are some people holding hands, and they're men. And this group of youngsters that I'm in, we're intolerant towards this group because we're homophobic. So we chased these guys out of the park, and we didn't catch them because they were faster than us. But if we had, they might have been assaulted and bashed.
I'm a homeless book. Do you think homelessness is a choice that anyone normally makes?
I think that's a kind of like a fable. I mean, no one really wants to be out homeless because it's just too degrading. It's just too degrading, really. I mean, no one wants to have to depend on someone for cash for a meal, or not have a roof over their head in the night. When it gets nighttime and people and the streets are empty, it's a tough place. So that to me it's not voluntary. I think the majority of the people who suffer from being homeless are suffering from a mental illness.
When I was 19, my friend was stabbed 6 times in the stomach at a party by 2 youngsters for no reason. They throw him in the bushes, and somebody found him there while he was bleeding to death. If Christian had not been stabbed by these 2 youngsters in 1993, there would be no living library today. He was the reason why I entered into the anti-violence work and ended up 8 years later sitting with an idea that if we can create the relation, break down the stereotypes, get people out of the boxes, then we can diminish the consequences of violence.
We are Teenage Books.
What do you guys feel about zits and pimples?
Oh, it's so annoying.
It sucks.
Yeah.
I went through a bad pimple phase in the 8th grade. I'm so happy it's over.
She has a session now with Michael, but then she wants to talk to the fat activist. Okay. If you don't come back, I'm going to come find you.
Between two Latin males, even just taking the time to consider the concept behind feminism can be taboo. It's like, oh, I don't talk about those things.
Exactly. It's really interesting because working on an issue like domestic violence, for example, there's the cultural machismo aspect in Latin culture that isn't as prevalent in other cultures. It doesn't mean it's not present, it's just not as prevalent.
One of the things that first comes to mind is the stereotypes of feminism and how, just like there's stereotypes with Latin culture.
Right. Certainly, and it's so hard to compete with the stereotype that feminists hate men, because then by that very stereotype, we sometimes drive away the opportunity to engage men in a conversation. All right, well, that's that. But very nice to meet you.
Have a good day.
You too.
If I come across the idea of feminism, I'm going to be more aware of what they're doing. They're not just thinking about things; they're actually trying to make things happen.
It was absolutely terrific. I wasn't sure who I was going to pick for my book to check out, but picked out the best possible person. She gave me a real sense of what fat activism is all about, the prejudice that so many people, I didn't think I had any. Maybe I didn't, I don't know, but I don't now, that's for sure.
All the people that I've talked to, I think I've impacted them a little bit, and I know for sure that they have impacted me.
I got chill bumps sometimes. I've got real disconnection with people because that's what I think real dialogue is really supposed to be. And I could see when they left the room that they were better for it.
The feeling you get is gratitude. To be part of something beautiful, to be part of people coming over to you. They just spend all their time volunteering for you. They come over and thank you. They thank you for using them.
I thought maybe nobody would come for a cancer survivor because that's sort of like signing up for wife beating. But they did, and one lady cried, and they were just, this one man, he just didn't take his eyes away from me. And I kept wanting to hear his story. I wanted to hear everybody's story, but they seem more interested in mine.
Okay, now this is not really my best side, but I'll...
With the Living Library, I'm hoping to stimulate the creation of those relations across the community so that if we get in a conflict, instead of burning down each other's neighborhoods, we're going to sit down and talk about things. We're going to need this glue in our community to hold people together so that the whole thing doesn't fall apart.
Christine, maybe we can unshare
Yes.
the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So just interested in hearing some of your thoughts about that movie. If it answered any of your questions, or you still have questions? Jason?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was having trouble getting my AirPods to sync up. So I honestly, I was one of the people that said I did not know about a human library or living library as he founded it. And I could see in most of those individuals different prejudices that have come about, throughout my life and whatnot, just in what you hear people say. But honestly, the one that really I didn't understand was the last one, the cancer prejudice, the cancer book there. The way she made a connection, she said, I didn't think anybody was going to choose me because that's like choosing somebody that for, I think she said wife beating. Is that what she said? And I don't understand that connection there. So there's something there that she felt and she was, looked down upon for that made her make that type of description there. And that's something that you don't really think of. I mean, I have a lot of healthcare workers in my family, and we're very positive about helping people and making sure that everybody has access to healthcare and getting the proper resources for that. I never would have thought of somebody who's a cancer survivor having that type of feeling and going through the process of recovery. So that just kind of struck me as something that, you know, I would never begin to imagine. So that would be a very unique person to interview, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jason. Anyone else? Comments, thoughts?
Well, I want to say that this is, well, I'm a librarian, and so I'm biased of saying that this is a brilliant project, not because it is not really a library project, but it is a people's project, you know, because it is, you talk about people checking out, making those books that we have alive, you know. If you think about autobiographies of people that became people, I mean, so you talk to them and then you get the authenticity of, if you become the reader, then you get the authenticity of the story. There's power in storytelling, as we all know, but hearing it firsthand from the people who were marginalized, you know, that creates a lot of an impact to more people. Now, using the structure of the library, you know, the language, checkout, reader, book, I mean, it's just great. And as I was reading about this, I can see it happening in our library. And, you know, our library, we kind of, we have like this place right now, for example, that stimulates a lot of like deep thinking. So right now we have like the sex and gender identities. And so having it in the library as venue would be a great place to conduct this. But there's the devil's in the details. And so like people are going to be involved. I mean, we really have to talk about it, but I think the library is a great place to put this kind of event. So.
Oh, wow, thank you. And we definitely will talk more about what it would take, some of the logistics. But thank you so much for your support on that. Really appreciate it. It means a lot.
I am also another librarian, and I agree with Rochelle. Hi, Rochelle.
Yes, you are, Elaine.
Yeah.
Thank you for your support too.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm wondering if we judge people because of its learned behavior, how we were raised from a parent or a grandparent, or is it a singular bad experience? And what percentage do you think on either side as to why we judge people?
That is the $1 million question. I feel like some of the things that were brought out in the film show a negative experience that, well, the originator, when he was speaking, talked about some negative experiences he had that really, that he generalized into prejudice and stereotypes. And for me, I feel like, and I'm sure this is true for most of us, it was just, I can't think of an incident growing up specifically, but growing up where I did, it was in the water, I breathed it in the air. It was just how my worldview was just framed by the environment I grew up in. And I didn't question it for a really long time. Kelsey?
I just wanted to say that as I was watching the video, and I was one of the people who said I did not know what this was at all, and I didn't watch your preview or anything, bad student. But I really, really was excited as I was watching the video. And the question that just kept popping up in my mind is, how would you get people to use this human library? And so as I was thinking that through, just all sorts of ideas about assignments we could give students and things like that. But just also thinking about beyond our community college. I mean, if we did a project like this, it would be something that I think would be so beneficial to the greater community beyond the college as well. So yeah, that's the burning question for me, is like how to incentivize people to utilize a resource like this.
Nice.
Yeah, and Kelsey, I know that human libraries in the past have invited, even at colleges, they've invited community members. And so as we start talking about details, if this is something we want to do, that would definitely be part of the conversation, right? Like, who are we inviting? How are we getting the word out? But I appreciate the idea of getting out there in the classrooms and talking, incentivizing. That's awesome.
For sure.
I was also wondering how people get screened to be the living book. That's one question that I had. Like, we all have different stories, and I don't know how to say it. It's my reality may be different from another, let's say another Brazilian woman who came here later in life like me, so how are these people being selected? So that was one question.
Yes, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. It's a great point and a very important piece of this puzzle, and making sure we do it correctly if we do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andy. Other thoughts?
If I may, this is Jason again. So I just wanted to go back to, I think what Joan was saying about where do these judgments come from? And the thing that I think of when we look at this is, in a setting like this, a bunch of people who I don't know many of you on here, but if I'm with my family and we're having a heated discussion about whatever topic is out there for the news right now, I can almost guarantee that if there's 15 of us sitting there, there's gonna be 15 different opinions about what's happening. And some of us are going to have very strong opinions about something, and some of us might have downright prejudices against a particular person or group or whoever made some sort of speech that particular day or something. And even though we all grew up very, very closely, past 40 some odd years for me, it's a very close-knit family. Yet some of us, we look at each other and go, did they really just say that? And we know them. They're not bad people. They're not trying to be mean about anything. But in that situation, you could really let loose and let things happen at the end of the conversation. And you go home, you give each other hugs and say, love you, and you go home. But it's just in that group, that same family, we all have different personalities and how we're going to perceive things. And I think that goes back to, where in the world do we get these opinions, even from our own parents who don't have those opinions? I mean, is it from friends? Is it from what we watch? It's hard to say, but I think that's, again, kind of just, I hate to call it a miracle because in some cases it's bad, but just how our mind works. I just read a headline the other day, that scientists might be on the verge of understanding where consciousness comes from. And just the headline alone made me want to go to bed, but it's just too hard to comprehend. But I think I don't know if we'll ever figure out exactly what happens there.
Yeah, and it's not really answered in the Blind Spot book, but it's interesting because Blind Spot's subtitle is The Hidden Biases of Good People. And so you're talking about, I love my family, they're good people, but wow, where did that come from?
I saw a comment from, I think it's Jeanette, right? Are we considering college student participation for perhaps a live event? So that's something we're going to be talking about here today, is the possibility of a live event and how students could participate. So yeah, we're going to speak on that. Thank you for your question.
I have a question. I just ordered this book. It's called Stranger to Ourselves. I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but it's all about how we don't really know ourselves, and the people who observe us, could be family or friends, sometimes knows you better than you know yourself, because you don't think you're coming across a certain way that you are. So I'm really excited about reading this. It's supposed to be a really great read. So just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, thank you. I wrote that title down, and maybe after you've read it, you wouldn't mind letting me know what you thought. That sounds great. And this morning, some of us were at the PD Institute, and it was about being intentional. And we learned about self-reflection, and they took us through some exercises of typical scenarios that we've all been through. and thinking through how did we react and reflecting on that. So yeah, stranger to ourselves. It can be a real problem. Kristen, do you want to show the map of where human libraries have been? And as she's bringing that up, I just want to mention that you probably noticed in the video that he was calling it a living library, and that was the original title. And then it morphed into human library.
So as you can see on this lovely map that is on the Human Library website, they have had human libraries all over the world. One of the, I don't know, Leslie, if this was the first place you heard about it, but UC Davis did some events for the Human Library. And, you know, we would be, if we were able to do a Human Library event, we would be the first ones in Sacramento. There's not any in Sacramento, but it would be really great. And then also during COVID, they were doing online events as well. And they're trying to, the Human Library Organization is trying to figure out how to expand the reach with technology. Okay. So a few more details. I know in the video he mentioned 45 minutes to an hour, but I think from the reading that Leslie and I have done, as well as our conversations with the UC Davis staff, the interactions are typically about 20 minutes. So the book would share their story, and then the reader would have an opportunity to engage and ask questions during that time as well. It's preferable to have one-on-one sessions. However, if there is a big need, you could actually have multiple readers at one time. We saw a few different ways in the video that they did that. Readers can check out more than one book. So if there's time permitting, they could read a book and then schedule another book during that event. And like I mentioned, there was an online format during the pandemic. I'd like to share a little bit about my experience. I didn't hear about human libraries until we did the Blind Spot book. And I was really excited about it, and I wanted to experience an event, and there weren't any going on. So I signed up for an online through the Human Library, and they did it through Zoom. And it was very interesting because they had, they put a group of people into a Zoom breakout room. And then there was about 4 or 5 readers in the room, and then they would drop a book into the room with us. And then the book would share their story, and then we would get a chance to ask our questions and engage with that book. It was a great experience for me. There were people from all over the world. There was Afghanistan and like Lithuania, just like all over the place. And so that was really fascinating. New Zealand. And, you know, for me, there was one, I got to read 2 books. One was someone who had a mental health challenge. Another person had alcohol addiction that they had overcome. And it was, even though I'm a mental health provider, for me, it was really interesting to ask some of those questions that you wouldn't typically ask somebody if you met them and they were experiencing that. And I got to, you know, each person is going to have their own questions. And so it was interesting to see how someone from another country was interested about the mental health system and how they had, you know, been discriminated against. So it's a good experience for me, and I'm excited about this. And I would love to see an event on our campus. Okay, so I know we did a kind of a big questions and comment section. We still have some more details for you guys, but were there any more burning questions before we moved on? Okay.
All right, so this maybe goes back to the comment and the suggestion of stranger to ourselves. You get a chance to do a little self-reflection, and you will not be asked to share this. This is really for you to start looking in and thinking about, you know, all the possibilities of these books. And since I teach English, I love to do free writes with my students. Let me tell you how I ask them to do free writes. A free write is for the writer. And that means it can be as messy as you want it to be. It can be, you don't worry about grammar or spelling. And you could go from one idea to another without using transitions. It's really just you getting, in a short amount of time, some ideas down on paper. So if you're sitting at your device and you want to type, that's totally fine. Otherwise, just grab a pen or pencil and some paper. And your prompt is, if you were a book. So remember, the book is an individual who volunteers to, and we're not asking you to volunteer, who volunteers to speak about themselves in a way that might dispel stereotypes. When we were watching the video, you could see that as books were presented, they were identified either by a badge that they were wearing, or it was typed into the video. So and this is not limited to one thing. We all are multifaceted humans. If you were a book, what would your title be? What might you share about yourself with a reader? So I'll give you just a few seconds to gather piece of paper and a pencil before I start my timer, or whatever it is you're going to be typing on. And I'm going to put it for 3 minutes and see how we do. The other thing that I like to tell my students with a free write is just try to flow with it. Don't stop and overthink anything. Give yourself the challenge. Once you put the pen down, you're not going to pick it up until the 3 minutes are up. Even if that's one big, long run-on sentence, we don't care. So we're going to have you start now. Just giving you a heads up that we're halfway through our 3 minutes. So you still have a minute and a half. Okay. Go ahead and finish up the idea that you're on. I hope that that was an enlightening reflection, and that it kind of got you thinking about all of the possibilities of folks who have experienced any kind of judgment, discrimination, or prejudice. So Kristen is going to talk about some titles that we have become aware of.
Absolutely. So Leslie and I were just looking around different human libraries that have happened in the past. And we just want to note that this is what the books have titled themselves. And so sometimes maybe this is what the words we would use for titles of books, but this is what people have identified as. And so you can see there's quite the list here. And obviously this is not every book that's ever been done, but we were trying to find just some different ideas of books from other events. Are you surprised by any of the titles on the list here? I know Jason earlier brought up this idea, right, of like, wow, I didn't think about how someone would want to share their experience about being discriminated against or having a difficult time. So is there anything surprising here?
I think once I saw it, the high IQ, really? I mean, but you hear about, certain stereotypes that go along with that, I guess. So sometimes you look at it like, why? And then you think about what are some of the things that you've heard in the past about people with high IQ, what might they go through? So, I mean, you see so many different people with high IQs. I mean, honestly, Snoop Dogg is actually a person with an extremely high IQ. So you don't really think of individuals with high IQ as being holding on to being held a presidency against or something, but something like that.
Think of the cartoon stereotypes, though.
Right, and that's what I mean. You go think, you have to think back as to how what you've seen it in what context. With us, my wife and I, with our kids, we tell them, hey, we say it in a joking way, but still we say it. Go ahead, be a nerd, be a dork, get the highest grade you can. Who cares what other people think? But somebody that's has a high IQ, you can definitely look back and think of how people treated them as what my kids would call a try hard. Now, that's something that his kids are saying right now. So surprising, but understandable, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I think the one that caught my attention was the parent of a child with disability. Why would that be something that makes people feel prejudiced against others? I think maybe you would borrow this book more out of, for me, would be to try to understand how parents can help children that have disability, not out of prejudice, but more to see how they can do that.
That's so interesting, because both Kristen and I are parents of a child with a disability.
Oh yeah.
And
we talked about this. Yeah.
Yes. And we are judged.
Really?
Especially when my son with autism was little, some of his behaviors in public places. And in fact, I wrote a poem about it, but I could see the parents judging me for his behavior and judging me for even bringing him into a public space. Kristen, do you want to?
Yeah. So my daughter had a brain hemorrhage before she was born, and subsequently had multiple disabilities, really. And she's an amazing, resilient kid. But when people first meet her, or maybe they see her on paper, like through an IEP or something, I just get the feeling that people are judging in a way like, well, what did you do to this child? Or like, maybe you didn't take care of yourself while you were pregnant, or something like that, where it's just this, like, as a parent, you're supposed to keep your child safe and keep them healthy and whole. And when that when some scientific thing happens and
right.
yeah, so there's this sense of like, you know, what did you do wrong or something like that.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because there are so many of these. You're kind of like, why? You know, if you haven't experienced it. And that's really the beauty of the human library. And I see that Laurel has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted, I don't know if you can hear me or see me.
Yes.
Okay, I don't see myself. I just wanted to add to that conversation. My daughter also has autism, and it's a word that I throw around freely because I feel like there's so much stigma attached to it that I'm trying to help change the culture of like that it's just a part of human spectrum, right? And I feel like once somebody has like, oh, your child has autism, then they're more understanding and forgiving. But my take on it is I almost feel like we all need to be aware of just human accommodations and that we don't need that label for us to be non-judgmental of others.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Laurel. Really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Any others that are maybe surprising to you or curious?
Sorry, if nobody else can, I have another one. I saw there below: cancer survivor, endometriosis. I mean, we all can see how some people might hold prejudices against certain people, things that they can see or sense or something like that. But endometriosis is not something typically that, you know, a biological female is going to share necessarily with everybody that they see. So that is, you know, a medical condition. And I'm hoping that it's not something where their own caregivers are holding something against them with that particular condition. I mean, just as I saw that, and you know, I know they'd share that maybe, I guess, with family members. Oh, I found out I have endometriosis. Is there somebody really that, I guess there is somebody who is holding that against them for that? So it, you know, you can't see that's not an outwardly, you know, visible type of condition. So I'm surprised to see that one up there too. But obviously, people feel that they're looked at in a different way with that particular diagnosis.
Yeah, and if you go from the backside of it, people may judge the symptoms or results, not knowing. And that's part of the pain as well, isn't it? Like, you have a condition, it may not be visible, but it impacts in a certain way that other people maybe could judge you for, like missing work or not having children, like a couple of the chats put in here, infertility, maybe judging women for deciding not to have children, or not being able to. Fascinating.
Sorry, I saw Malane's hand up.
Malane.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to this as somebody who has endometriosis. It really, in my experiences of it, are actually like lack of care from medical providers more than anything else I have dealt with this condition. It has been the lack of care from, you know, people who I pay to take care of me, lack of interest in getting me any kind of diagnosis, like the stereotypes and prejudices that the medical field has towards women, full stop. And it gets worse if you're a woman of color or if you are any kind of queer or any kind of, like, there are so many layers, but that is like fundamentally the biggest hurdle for me, was getting care from the medical field for this condition, because everything was, oh, you're overreacting, oh, it can't be that bad, oh, I'm going to give you like 47 different diagnoses that all just mean pain in a different language, as if that is a solution to the fact I am feeling pain. Like that's a big part of it in my experience.
Wow. Thank you so much, Melaine, for clarifying that, because it's exactly what Jason was hoping wasn't the case.
Exactly. I was just going to say that that's something I was hoping was not going to be the case. And unfortunately, it sounds like it's pretty prevalent.
And Todd.
Yeah, and something to keep in mind that it's coming up for me is a lot of these things aren't necessarily a prejudice, right? It's that we all of us struggle in life for some reason or another. And sometimes we need to be understood, and I think of my wife. She's taking care of her mom and doesn't have time, and she just constantly feels judged because she can't do other church activities or meet the needs of other people's health. And it's just one of those things that as we read these people's human libraries, we also understand their perspective and their struggles in life. And I think a big thing is learning to have empathy. Like this could be, this project isn't necessarily seeing all our biases. Yes, that is a big part of it, but we can also understand that, boy, there's people struggling in life in general, and just having empathy. And when people act out and you just don't understand why they see life the way they do, just recognizing they're coming from a different point of view, whether it's having a child with a disability or taking care of an elderly mother or having endometriosis. I think that's a big thing that we can learn from this.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And I know that there are people on this call who are caregivers of elderly parents or grandparents, and it is hard. Jason?
Yeah, it's interesting that Todd brought that up, because my mom, she's taking care of my grandmother who's 90. She just turned 95, I think Monday. And she has her own brother who lives in, so my uncle lives in my grandmother's house, even though my grandmother lives with my mom. And then my aunt who lives 10 minutes away. But my mom does everything. She's the one that is the primary caregiver, and she takes her all of her appointments. And everybody on here who has somebody that, or they are a caregiver or knows somebody that gives care. Yeah, I mean, her own family totally feel like she's doing nothing. My aunt put out a family newsletter talking about how much everybody else has been doing over the past couple of years with the pandemic and everything, but didn't even, and this is something that my mom felt because she read the letter, didn't even mention the work that my mom is doing to care for my grandmother. So yeah, something like that. It's just right
It's
there.
one of those things, if you haven't done it, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Which just means our books can be unlimited.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a
Eva,
great segue. Oh,
yeah. Eva put in the chat about, not sure about this book, but what about different political views? There's such a divide and so much vitriol in this country related politics. That is so true. So much baggage coming from political views. And wow, yeah, that's something that I hadn't considered either. I think that's really important to consider.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to tell you there's an organization, it's called Braver Angels. And it's for people that have totally different political views, and they get together and have conversations about why they believe what they do, where they're getting their perceptions. So it's called Braver Angels.
Thank you again for this book recommendation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so I'm just super excited about all the discussion you guys are bringing. We are very happy. The next thing we'd love to hear from you. So if you can put this in the chat, what books would you like to read? And if you're not comfortable putting it in the chat, you could also do a private message, either myself or to Leslie. But we would love to, get the chat going and see what you guys think would be a good book.
Yeah, this will really help us if we do organize the library of what folks would really like to know more about.
Ooh. I do like that. Thank you, Anne.
And I know this is putting you on the spot. So if you like are going drive in the car and you say, that's what I would like to hear about, that's a title I would really like to hear about, email us. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Different mental health issues. Thank you, Jesselyn. Is this question also on the survey, Kristen?
No.
Okay.
I could probably throw it on there real quick. I'll try to do that while you're talking, Leslie.
Okay. So yeah, if something comes to your mind, throw it in the chat. We can start maybe a Google Doc that we can share with you all, that people can put their ideas on for book titles. We wanted to be transparent about some research that's been done on the human library. And most of the information has come from a study that was done called The Power of One-on-One, Human Libraries and the Challenges of Anti-Racism Work. And so first, we're going to identify some of the limitations that we learned about. One is, and this was part of the blind spot book as well, that the individual attitude changes may not be generalized to a group. So maybe you have a born-again Christian reader of a Baha'i religion book, and maybe the reader really has opened up her mind to what she has learned from her book. That doesn't necessarily mean that her group is going to be changed by this. Another limitation is that changing individual attitudes is a good first step, but must be followed by social action. So I think that's always got to be part of the discussion, that, okay, what can we follow up with? What workshop can we hold? What opportunity can we provide once people are starting to open up their minds about particular biases? Also, participants tend to self-select, limiting impact on organizational structural change. So that's always kind of the case with studies, that if people say, hey, I'd love to go to the human library and learn about people who are different than I am, that there's something about that person who is maybe probably more likely to make changes in themselves. And besides limitations, there's also potential risks. And the Human Library Organization has a lot of training materials to sort of mediate some of these that are embedded in the model of the human library. So potential risk is emotional pain for the books, talking about the ways that they've been judged. Part of that also is some people feel that the book metaphor may seem dehumanizing. You can kind of see that. You're a book, you're being checked out, you're being borrowed, and then you're going to be put back. There's always the possibility of not feeling understood. And so depending on who the reader is, And there's a potential for re-traumatizing by sharing experiences, which I think is in some way helped by the fact that the books are volunteers and get trained and know that this is a possibility. Potential risk for readers could be sort of that feeling ignorant, like, oh, I should know better. I should already know something about this. They may be perceived as being prejudiced. And then, of course, as you can imagine with some of the book titles that we saw, there could be really strong emotions from sensitive topics. I mean, on that list, you had incest, victims of sexual violence, things like that. And so we wanted to just put that out there and let you know we are aware of these going into this. And then happily, there are also benefits. So readers report changed mindsets and newfound commonalities with books. Participants report a stronger, wider sense of community and of breaking barriers. Participants share how they were changed by their experience. And then the research does talk about the potential ripple effect of a reader experienced a change. That reader shares that experience with friends and family. Benefit is it is a safe space for risk-taking. It has a lot of support surrounding it. The vulnerability is more evenly distributed between book and reader than in other interactions. For example, just plain storytelling. So someone is on a stage telling their story, they're being very vulnerable in telling it, but then there's just an audience who doesn't necessarily engage or ask questions. So that's a benefit of this model. And then we have some testimonials from people who have participated. And Kristen, I'm just looking. Are you okay with sharing the Google Doc? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give access to anyone with the link to view it and put the link to our PowerPoint or the Google Slides in the chat so that we can move on. And Kristen's going to talk a little bit about what it would take to actually host a human library.
Okay, so if you use the title of human library, since this is through an organization, we'd have to get an organizer license. So we're discussing that with the administrators at CRC as a possibility. One of the biggest issues that came up earlier, where I was planning for the safety of everyone involved, particularly the books who are really putting themselves out there. So we would have to make sure that we recruit books appropriately, that they have training beforehand, that they have a support system already in place, that they have, if they have been traumatized, that is something that they have worked on. And as well as, doing checking in at the end of the event and during the event to make sure that books are okay. The Human Library does have training for that. The folks at UC Davis were kind enough to share with me the training that they did as well. We would need to, for a successful event, we've heard about 6 to 8 books would be good. We would not be recruiting books from staff members. We would definitely be looking out in the community. I mentioned the training, and then let's see. So earlier we talked about drawing in readers. So obviously there's some issues with COVID, and we'd have to see if we had an event where we were with COVID precautions at that point. But it would be amazing to invite, obviously, staff and students and people from the community as well, if we could. And then let's see. And then, one of the things we've talked about is how do you make sure that this event works towards anti-bias, anti-racism, not just in that moment, but we would like to partner with other organizations so that if people are inspired during that event, they can learn more about the books that they've read in those communities and get more information or get more involved. And then let's see, what's next? So as far as faculty and staff, what could your role be with the Human Library? So, if people didn't want to, plan it, they could still be a participant. So you could attend an event as a reader. Librarians are trained to facilitate the whole process. So they schedule the books that are going to be read. They don't have to be actual librarians, but that would be their title for the day. And so they would schedule books. They also walk around and check in on the books and make sure that everything is going smoothly. Obviously, we would need some support if we did an event the day of. So just getting the space set up. We would need a large space. Obviously, we talked about that a little bit as maybe the library, possibly the Wynn Center. And then a planning committee, because if we were to do this event, it would be time intensive. So we would need to do a lot of planning and promoting. And then mental health support. So obviously for people with this kind of background, they could help with the training of the books, supporting the books before and after the event. And so there's a lot of different ways that if faculty and staff are interested in participating, if we did an event, this is how you could participate. So we have a survey we would like for you to fill out about whether or not you think we should have this event and a few other questions. So I'm going to put that in the chat. So if you could take a moment to at least open it, and if you can fill it out right now, but you might need some time to reflect. But if you could open that form and fill it out for us so we could get some feedback from you, that would be amazing.
Perfect timing. You have a few minutes to work on. We didn't want to send you off with homework. The semester hasn't even started. But if you want to take the time to more thoughtfully do it, that's totally fine as well. But we are giving you a few minutes now before we close.